My name is Nora Vale, and I'm 67 years old. I have lived my entire life in Harbor Ridge, a wind-brushed coastal town in Maine where the gulls squabble over fish guts, and the lighthouse keeps count of storms like a faithful old bookkeeper. I thought I knew every sound the ocean could make, and every secret a small town could hide, until the day I buried my husband and felt my phone vibrate with a message that stole the breath from my lungs. My me in the casket. Don't trust our children. My hands went cold as the shovel of clay hit the coffin with a dull, unforgiving thud. I looked up. The sky was a flat pewter, the air raw with sea salt. Our son Jonah stood on the other side of the grave wearing a somber navy suit and a watch I'd never seen before. Our daughter Lena dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, her husband Ronan at her elbow like a shadow with a jawline. They were dressed the way grief is supposed to be dressed: black, polite, composed. Sexes like pulsed on my screen like a vein. I'm alive. "What is it, Mom?" Jonah asked, his voice as smooth as the blazer he wore. "Nothing," I said, pressing the phone into my coat pocket like it might burn a hole through the lining. "Just the weather alert." Heach reached for my elbow. "Let's get you home." I nodded because there was nothing else to do. They led me away from the grave like dutiful children. I should have felt comforted by their hands. Instead, I shivered. I tell you how things changed, and how I changed. Let me welcome you in the way we do here. This is Revenge Stories with Michelle, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. Caleb and I had grown up together on this rocky strip of coast. I was a harbor master's daughter. He was the orphaned boy who learned to fix skiffs and patch sails in the boat shed behind the bait shop. He smelled of cedar shavings, motor oil, and honest sweat. We got married at 25 in the little white church with the bell that has never hung quite straight. We bought a weathered gray house with a pitched roof and a stubborn lilac bush that bloomed twice a year like something brave. Money was thin as cracker bread, but we had enough. Enough love, enough stubbornness, enough jokes to carry us through lean winters. When Jonah was born, Caleb cried into the crook of his elbow and laughed at the same time. 2 years later, Lena arrived with a cry that reached all the way to the wharf. Caleb taught them how to tie knots before they knew how to write their names: bowline, clove hitch, sheet bend. And I taught them to look people in the eye, say thank you, and keep their letters neat. On Sundays, we ate chowder at the kitchen table with its scar of a burn mark from the time a pot boiled over, and we didn't notice because we were slow dancing to an old Sam Cooke record. We didn't have much, but we had us. The first cracks in that simple life appeared like hairline fractures in frosted glass. So fine at first you have to tilt the pane just so to see them. Jonah, bright and restless, left for Boston to work at a venture fund whose name sounded like a weather pattern. Lena followed the next year with a marketing job at a luxury home brand that made thick catalogs full of furniture that looked like it belonged in museums where no one was allowed to sit. They started speaking a new language: equity tranches and burn rates, brand pillars and target demos. They visited less. They arrived in cars that purred instead of coughed. Their laughter sounded rehearsed. When they hugged us, I felt their bodies but not their warmth. "Ket, Ma," Lena said on one rare weekend home, looking around our kitchen with its old oak cabinets and the magnet-sprinkled fridge. You and Dad could sell this place and buy a little condo with an elevator. No more stairs, close to the city. Culture. Manslaughter? Caleb said and winked at me. We've got the Clam Festival and the 4th of July parade, and the lighthouse reads to me every night in Foghorn. Michelle smiled, patient like a nurse. You know what I mean. Jonath kept his mouth shut, but I could see him measuring the house with his eyes, turning it into numbers. The dock, the shed, the patch of yard where the grass never grew because our dog Penny used to dig until we could see her tail wagging from the other side of the earth. Our lives were turning into columns on a spreadsheet. The night before the accident, I couldn't sleep. I went out to Caleb's truck to look for my reading glasses. I misplace things more often these days, like my mind is a room with too many drawers. Maybe that is why I opened the glove box. Maybe it was the moonlight painting everything the color of bone. Inside, under registration papers and an old town map, was a small black phone I didn't recognize, and a key on a red ribbon. The phone was one of those cheap, prepaid ones kids call burners on TV. The key was unusually heavy, with a number stamped into its head. 1422. I should have woken Caleb, but his breathing was deep and even, and a strange ache pressed behind my breastbone. I put the phone and the key back and told myself to ask in the morning. I did not ask. Morning carried us away on its own gray tide. At 9:17 a.m., my kitchen phone rang. Mrs. Vale, a woman said, this is Mercy General. Your husband was found collapsed at the boatyard. Please come now. I arrived with my hair unbrushed and my sweater buttoned wrong. A doctor with soft hands told me Caleb had suffered a catastrophic event. The way they choose words, catastrophic event, as if life were a weather forecast. He's unresponsive, the doctor said. We're doing everything we can. Jonah and Lena appeared 30 minutes later with the speed of people who already had their coats on when the call came. I didn't wonder about that at the time. I was too busy looking at my husband through clear plastic and cords. Dismissed. He died 3 days later. Quietly, the nurse said, as if there is a louder way. I held myself together because it seemed polite, because the town was watching, because grief can be a tidy surface over a broken floor. And then my phone vibrated. I'm alive in the casket. Don't trust our children. On the road from the cemetery, I pressed my fingertips into the phone's screen so hard I thought I might smudge my prints. In the back seat, Lena texted under her veil. Jonah checked his watch like time owed him something. In the driveway, the wind tilted my hair like a question mark. They stayed just long enough to inventory the refrigerator and remind me about the paperwork. Jonah suggested we meet with a financial advisor he trusted. Lena had already printed a brochure for a cheerful senior community called Birchhaven, with smiling people holding pastel mugs. You'd have friends around, she said, pointing at a photo of a watercolor class. Yoga for bones, a nurse at night. I have a bed, a kettle, and my own front door, I said. I have a porch that remembers the sound of Caleb's boots. Your father's boat is out back, and she hates strangers. Mom, Jonah said gently, we just want you safe. I nodded because love wears many costumes, including the costume of a plan that has nothing to do with you. They left after promising to call in the morning. I listened to their car glide down the hill and counted the seconds after silence. The message was still there, floating like a small, fierce light in my palm. I typed back, "Who is this?" Returned like shore foam. "Meet me tomorrow, 3 p.m. Back table at the Heron Cafe. Come alone. Use the key." "What key?" No reply. Then 5 minutes later, glove box. I walked outside in my funeral shoes and slid into Caleb's truck. The key on the red ribbon was exactly where I had seen it. The burner phone was still there too, cold as a fish. I snapped off the overhead light, pocketed the key, and felt the first clear thought since Mercy General. If was alive, whose body had I buried? The Heron Cafe sits near the ferry dock, a narrow room with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu that makes everything sound like an apology. At 2:55 p.m. the next day, I went in and ordered chamomile tea because it seemed steady. The back table gave me a view of both the door and the wall clock shaped like a fish. At precisely 3, a woman walked in, tall, wearing a raincoat the color of smoke, her hair scraped back in a no-nonsense knot. She saw me, hesitated just a breath, then came over. "Mrs. Vale?" she asked. "Yes." She sat. "I'm Kira Dwyer," she said. "Caleb hired me 3 weeks ago. He thought your children were planning something. He asked me to watch." "You're the one who texted me," I said. "I'm the conduit," she replied. "Caleb's in hiding." "From Jonah and Lena?" "From what they've wrapped themselves in," Kira said. "You know how money is like the ocean? Beautiful at a distance, dangerous if you pretend you can't drown." I didn't want metaphors. I wanted Caleb. "Is he alive?" Nodded. "Yes." My breath left me in a shudder. "Then whose funeral?" "A body was substituted," she said quietly. "An unclaimed man from the county morgue. The funeral director, Roscoe Hanks, is under investigation for other irregularities. He owed favors to a doctor in Boston. I'll get to that." The room tilted slightly, like a boat taking a wave sideways. "How?" I asked, hearing the thready sound of my own voice. "Why?" Salmon slid a small envelope across the table. "Caleb left you this, and he asked me to make sure you use the key." I opened the envelope. Inside was a note in Caleb's own way. Money was welking for later in Caleb's. I opened the envelope. "Caleb left you this." I opened the envelope. I opened it. Inside. I just his part. Sided why with Caleb lived with children and which children. I opened the envelope inside. "Caleb left you this. When I just wants to wish 'tis goin' to with. He did not from him to happen. Why? Caleb left you this." Inside was a little bit to keep the opened of note of Caleb's. "Had a helo," I said. "Caleb left will be very bigger. As his not. I tried to do this contingent, and he cries the note about the table. Sided why was differently and why is light. Caleb left you this. I just was a little bit to keep the opened of note of Caleb's. I just want you this. Sided why, I just want together. Caleb left me to take the key together and Caleb's. How God is like this is on a table. Sided Y was like just be. Caleb left me to keep the opened. She said, I didn't want to do without the table in January. Sided Y was differently. I find what together know together. Sided Y was like made a passin and Caleb's. Sided Y was like and anything from it teldend. How God is like the deep and Caleb's. Caleb left me to take the key together and Caleb's. Sided Y was like just be. Sided Y was like me together for the chattel. I try to do this continue and make the chattel. Sided Y was left you this. Sided Y was like not and Caleb's. Sided Y was like and anything from it teldend. I find what together know together in January. Sided Y was like not and Caleb's. Sided Y was like not and Caleb's. Sided Y was like and anything from it teldend. Sided Y was like made life. Sided Y was like made life together. Whether the chattel isn't myself, whether the chattel is not and Caleb's. Sided Y was like together for the chattel. Just is well achard. I try to do this continue, whether this was like and Caleb's. Sided Y was like not and Caleb's. Sided Y was like and Caleb's. Sided Y was like made life. But not just it in life with what you do ever. I try to do this continue, whether this was like and Caleb's. Sided Y was like made life. Let's see and far. Sided Y was like made life. Thanks. I wouldn't want was a note in Caleb's careful block letters and a bank deposit slip. Nora, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it to tell you plain. Something's wrong with our kids. I know how that sounds. It sounds like a storm lying about its direction, but it's true. Somebody got hold of them. Not just the people with suits and shiny teeth. Worse. The kind of men who take a man's name and cook it into something unrecognizable. There's a safe deposit box at Harbor Ridge Savings, box 1422. Use the red key. In it, you'll find a drive and papers. Kira Dwyer is good. I hired her after I found a phone in Jonah's coat with messages about guardianship and accelerated timelines. He wants you declared incompetent so he and Lena can take control of the house and the account. They call it protecting you. It ain't protection. Don't drink any coffee they bring, and don't sign a thing until you see Kira. I love you to the lighthouse and back. Caleb's. My eyes blurred. My thumb found the edge of the note like it was a talisman. What do you need from me? I asked. Courage and patience, Kira said. We're going to open that box. We'll see what Caleb collected. Then we're calling Sheriff Arden. He's decent. But I want to get ahead of your kids' next move. What is their next move? Emergency guardianship, Kira said. They've already scheduled a meeting with a probate judge tomorrow morning. They'll present a report from a psychiatrist who has never met you. They'll use words like delusional grief and risk to self. It's quick if a judge is willing. I thought of the Birch Haven brochure. Yoga for bones. Sheriff Arden? I said. I'll bring him in after we get evidence. If we show up. With empty hands, he'll pat our heads, and I don't like being patted. We went to Harbor Ridge Savings just before closing, when the day's money has been counted and everyone is tired of pretending to care about coins. The safe deposit room is a windowless rectangle with a hum like electricity. I slid the key into 1422. The lock turned with a mechanical satisfaction. Inside the box was a clear plastic thumb drive, a spiral notebook, and a manila folder with my name. The notebook held Caleb's handwriting, dates, names, notes about calls he overheard on speakerphone when Jonah forgot to hang up, or when Lena whispered in the pantry thinking sound doesn't travel through wood. There were references to a company I didn't recognize, True North Medical Partners. There were line items about consultations, nutritional supplements, and patient compliance. Thumbnail drive contained recordings, clean, crisp, and cruel. Jonah's. I told Dr. Marin we can't wait for natural decline. It could take years. We need an event we can explain. He says there's a way to sedate Dad gradually so it looks like he's failing on his own. Lena. Lower, uneasy. Jonah. Lena's was reviewed for different speaker, by one of the long by the corner from Jonah State. Lena become win and not just more. Lena didn't know, like a break them. Lena become win develop. Lena's visit partner, and could not just everything. Lena has to sedate Dad from Jonah with cabled event. Lena didn't know, when Jonah still tried to take other task that was closing. Lena didn't dull to have nothing develop. Lena become win and not just more. Lena didn't dull to have nothing develop. Lena didn't dealt to have nothing develop. Lena didn't dealt with creative not just one. And creative Lena didn't dealt with colleges develop. Lena didn't dealt to have nothing develop. Lower, uneasy. I don't want him to suffer. Jonah. He won't know. He'll nap and forget things. By the time it's bad, we'll have guardianship. Mom will be somewhere safe. We liquidate the house before the market dips. Everyone wins. Everyone doesn't win, Jonah. The alternative is we get hurt. Do you want that? Ronan said he can't hold them off much longer. A third voice entered a different clip. Smooth, clipped, expensive. This is Dr. Lyle Marin, it said. As discussed, our protocol relies on incremental dosing of prescribed anxiolytics. Side effects can mimic cognitive decline in older adults. Confusion, lethargy, falls. From a distance, it reads as natural aging. Discretion is paramount. I felt bile rise and forced it down like I have for years when something ugly insists on being seen. Kira's jaw tightened. Marin, she said softly. Boston. He runs a side business, expensive consults to wealthy families who want to manage inconvenient elders. Manage, I said, tasting the word like a bruise. Mira opened the manila folder. photocopies of bank transfers. A snapshot of Jonah standing in front of a townhouse in Back Bay, shaking hands with a man whose smile didn't reach his eyes. Lena walking into a private clinic through a side entrance, head down, scarf up. Ronan carrying a box labeled medical samples, like he worked there. Why did Caleb fake his death? I asked. Why not just go to Arden with this? Kira's face softened. He was going to, she said. But the day before the accident, Marin called Ronan from a number we traced to True North. We have the recording. They were moving faster than Caleb realized. Caleb suspected they'd try to sedate you next. He begged Hanks, the crooked funeral director, to help him disappear for a few days while I pulled a federal friend into the loop. Hanks is dirty, but he likes cash, and Marin sent him plenty to keep his other messes quiet. Caleb flipped him for a cut and for time. How did they get a body? Relinquia's mouth thinned. I'll spare you those details. There's an unclaimed city record. Sheriff Arden needs to handle it in the light. What matters right now is you. You need to stay away from Jonah and Lena until we can safely confront them with witnesses and cameras rolling. My children, I said, and the word felt slippery. We raised them to be good. Kira did not answer. She touched the drive with one finger. They made choices. That night, I slept on the couch with the thumb drive under my pillow. The house made its old sounds, the refrigerator's sigh, the wind under the eaves, the ghost of a boot scrape at the back door. I woke before dawn as if the lighthouse had sent me a telegram. Jonah and Lena arrived with coffee cups, paper, and concern. Mom, Jonah said, we just want a quick chat before your meeting. What meeting? I asked. With Dr. Ansel, Lena said. Her smile was bright and brittle. She's a specialist in grief. I don't need to see a specialist, I said. I need to see your father. They went very still, as if a photograph had just been taken. Jonah recovered first. Mom, he said gently, we know you're struggling to accept. Accept what? I asked. A fake funeral? Fake? Lena repeated. Mom, please. Sit, I said, and pointed to the kitchen table where my whole life has taken place. Homework and bills, birthday cakes and burnt pancakes, and notes from Caleb telling me he'd be home late. They sat. I set the thumb drive in the center like a small black stone. What's that? Jonah asked. Truth, I said. For a flicker of a second, I saw something naked in his eyes. Panic, then calculation. He reached into his jacket pocket. Mom, he said. Dr. Ansel wrote a recommendation for gentle support. It might help you understand. He handed me a letterhead that smelled faintly of cologne. I read the first line, words like progressive cognitive instability and impaired decision-making capacity, and slid it back. She's never met me. Jonah's went up. She consulted your chart. I smiled without humor. My chart is a grocery list and a blood pressure. Try again. Landa touched my hand. We're worried about you, she whispered. You're not eating, you're talking to yourself. You called the undertaker last night and asked if the coffin was empty. I looked at her and felt a sudden, sharp tenderness like a stitch in my side. I changed her diapers. I taught her to pluck split ends. Where did I go wrong? Was it gradual, like tides wearing down stone? Or did something break all at once? Do you know a Dr. Lyle Marin? I asked. Neither of them answered. They didn't have to. You brought coffee, I said. No, thank you. We can't have you sitting in this house alone, Jonah said, voice tightening. It's not safe. It's the safest place I know. He sighed, an exhale designed to sound like patience. Mom, we're doing this because we love you. You're doing this because you owe people, I said softly. Ronan owes the wrong kind of men. Jonah, your watch cost more than our first car. Lena, you never used to say deliverables like you were handing someone a baby. You've turned us into leverage. Flynn itched. Jonah stood, palms flat on the table. We're not discussing this, he said, the way a boss says it when he likes the way power feels in his mouth. Good, I said, and stood too. Because Sheriff Arden would rather hear the recordings himself. Pam Rass stepped in from the hallway where she'd been waiting, her phone trained on my children. Arden followed, tall and solid in his tan uniform. He nodded at me once. Respect. Morning, folks, he said. We're here on a matter of elder exploitation and medical fraud. I advise you to remain calm and keep your hands where I can see them. Salmon's face drained. You can't just... Kira tapped the screen. We can, she said, and we are. Lena began to cry, soft at first, then hard like thunder. Mom, she sobbed, I didn't want this. Ronan, lurking in the doorway like a storm cloud that forgot to break, turned to bolt. A deputy planted himself in the frame with a hand on his holster. No, he said. You'll stay. Arden took statements. Kira played recordings. Lena kept crying. Jonah kept insisting we misunderstood. That accelerated timeline referred to an investment. That protocol was a word everyone uses now. Kira showed the transfers. Arden asked about the substituted body. Jonah said nothing. His mouth bent into itself like a knot. By evening, 2 more deputies had escorted Jonah and Ronan to the cruiser, and Lena sat on my couch with a blanket around her shoulders and a stare like winter. My, she said quietly when Kira and Arden stepped outside to call the district attorney. He said it wouldn't hurt Dad. He said it would be like sleep. Who said? Lena swallowed. Marin. He said Dad would look tired and then... She broke off, shivering, then pulled words like thread from a torn hem. Jonah promised it was just to make the papers easier. Then Ronan got threats. I told myself a story so I could breathe inside it. We tell ourselves stories, I said, until they tell us. I'm so sorry, she whispered, covering her face. I'm so sorry, Mom. I stroked Lena's hair like she was 10 and feverish. It doesn't mean forgiveness was quick. It means love is complicated. The next 48 hours moved like a procession, slow, inevitable. Arden's team seized computers. Kira drove to Boston with 2 state investigators to pick up Marin. Hanks, the funeral director, unspooled in the interrogation room like an old cassette tape that's been rewound too many times. The DA moved for charges none of us had imagined would ever live in our family. Conspiracy to defraud, attempted unlawful guardianship, tampering with a corpse, medical fraud, elder exploitation, and more words that make you taste metal. And then, 2 days after I learned I had buried a stranger, Kira brought Caleb home. He was thinner, his beard a little wild, his eyes like a weathered shore. We stood in the kitchen with our hands hovering in the air because sometimes the space between seconds is the whole world. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," I said, and the word carried 46 years. He reached out. I stepped in. We held the kind of hug people talk about when they talk about life rafts. "I knew you'd find the key," he whispered into my hair. "I almost didn't." "Almost doesn't count for much," he said. We made tea because that is what people do in houses that remember how. We told each other everything you can tell with words. The rest we told with silences and touch. 2 bruised birds finding the same branch. A week later, the county exhumed the coffin. The body was identified through dental records as a man who had died without family or fuss. Sheriff Arden held a press conference on the steps of the courthouse. Harbor Ridge, which has known me since my knees were scabby and my hair was the color of dandelions, blinked at the cameras and tried to reconcile a quaint idea of our town with the more complicated one truth had dragged into daylight. Marin tried to slide through the cracks. Kira shut the cracks with timestamps and names. He was indicted on 7 counts. More would come. Ronan, faced with the prospect of a state sentence and the wrath of the men he owed, sang until his throat gave out. Jonah sat in a cell on the 3rd floor of the county jail with his hands folded and his jaw set like a locked vault. He asked to see me. I did not go, at least not yet. "Are we terrible parents?" I asked Caleb the first night we allowed ourselves to laugh at something small. Penny trotting in circles because I'd said the word walk twice. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders. "We were good parents," he said. "We're human. Our children are human. The world has a way of looking like a shiny thing when you're young and tired. They made bad choices. We have to make better ones now." "What better ones?" "We tell the truth," he said. "We help people who don't know where to stand when the tide comes in. We stop pretending we're the only ones this has happened to."
Kira helped us do just that. With the DA's support, we met with 3 families who had been Marin's clients. None of them had known the others existed. Their stories were different in details and identical at the bone. A parent slowly made to disappear in plain sight via doctor-guided protocols. A nurse who looked the other way. A son or daughter who found a justification large enough to live inside, and then discovered it had no doors. You cannot think about thoughts like these for too long without feeling the floor of your life soften under your feet. So we did what we have always done when the sea threatens to take us. We made something. We called it the Harbor Light Project. It's not a foundation yet. That word smells like marble. Just a fierce idea with a mailbox and a website, and a table in our dining room littered with forms and teacups. Kira volunteers her time on Thursdays and fights with insurance companies like a woman who was born speaking that language. Sheriff Arden advises families about their rights. Pastor Ellie from the Crooked Bell Church brings muffins. and the kind of prayers that feel like hands on your shoulders when you're too tired to stand. Caleb fixed up the old boat shed and turned it into a little office where we keep files and stories and a map of Maine stuck with pins where calls have come from. It looks like someone spilled stars across our coast. Lena moved back to Harbor Ridge to help. She is serving her sentence, probation, community service, and the longer sentence of having to look people in the eye who knew her before and know her now. Every Wednesday, she sits at our kitchen table and calls the old women in town who live alone to ask if they need their porch steps salted or a ride to the clinic. When someone hangs up on her, she takes a deep breath and calls the next. She is learning to walk through her own storm. Jonah pled not guilty. His attorney wears suits that look like hunger. The trial date looms, a red circle on a calendar we keep pretending is not important, while also setting reminders in our phones. I think about going to see Jonah in jail. Sometimes I drive to the lot and park and watch the fluorescent hum of the windows. Sometimes I grip the steering wheel until my fingers ache, and then I go home and sit on the porch, because the porch has opinions about knee-jerk decisions. One afternoon, a month after Caleb came home, a letter arrived from Jonah. His handwriting is the same as third grade, stubborn, slanted, a little proud. Mom, refresh, don't expect forgiveness. I do want you to hear me say I'm sorry without anyone watching. I thought I could fix a hole I dug with time I didn't have. I told myself a story where I was a good son doing hard things. Those stories are easy to tell until someone holds up the mirror. I'm sorry. I sat at the time with that small
apology in my hands. Caleb came in from the shed smelling like sawdust and safety. You going to write back? He asked. I don't know, I said. Maybe when he says the word apologize and it's not just a noun. Caleb smiled with his eyes. You have a poet's bone, he said. No, I said. I have a mother's bone. We waited for the trial the way people wait for weather, mostly living, occasionally glancing up. When it came, the courtroom smelled like damp coats and paper. Reporters perched on benches like seabirds who'd flown too far inland. Marin's face looked like an expensive sidewalk, smooth, gray, hard to crack. He pled to some charges to avoid others, and stood very straight when the judge spoke about duty and harm. Ronan wore a thrift store suit and a look of someone who has recently learned he's not indestructible. Lena sat behind us on the wooden bench and squeezed my hand until I nearly winced. And Jonah, my lamb, my wolf, my son, stared at the floor while the prosecutor rolled out recordings like fishing nets, and every lie he had told made a visible ripple in the water. When he finally lifted his head to look at me, I held his gaze because I didn't know what else to hold. The verdict took 2 days. Guilty on attempted unlawful guardianship, conspiracy to defraud, and medical fraud. The judge's words came like the steadiest tide. Mr. Vale, you betrayed your parents. The law cannot fix that. It can mark it. He got years, not life. Enough time to learn. It would be cleaner if I told you I forgave him right there in the courtroom and felt a great weight rise from my back like fog. It would also be dishonest. Forgiveness, in my experience, is not a dove. It's sand in an oyster. Irritation, worry, stubborn work, and, if you're lucky, something like a pearl you can hold between your thumb and index finger and squint at in the right light. I am working on it. Some days I am better at it than others. Spoina returned. The lilac bush out front woke up like someone remembered its name. The lighthouse did its job with no applause. Harbor Ridge went back to being the kind of place where people know your grandparents' nicknames and ask about your gallbladder without irony. I took up a new habit, walking to the pier at dusk with a bag of stale rolls and feeding the gulls who don't deserve it. Kira says I'm trying to bribe God. I tell her I'm giving God a show. On the 1-year anniversary of the funeral that wasn't, Pastor Ellie suggested a service, not for Caleb, who was busy arguing with a stubborn engine out back, but for truth. We stood on the beach with our shoes filling with sand and our mouths full of wind. People read names of their own lost certainties. The ocean listened the way it always does, honest, indifferent, holy. I read a blessing I wrote on the back of an envelope. May the hands that hold the pen choose mercy when they can and justice when they must. May we name what is broken without breaking what doesn't need breaking. May those who plotted learn stillness. May those who were harmed keep their names. After Kira found me, "I think you're a writer," she said. "I think I'm a woman with a lot of words," I said. "Writing them down is cheaper than a new porch." When the reporters came back in summer to do an update, the story had stretched beyond Maine like a rip current. I told them something I fear might have sounded wise and therefore suspicious. "Family isn't a guarantee," I said, staring into a lens that reflected my own face back like an old mirror. "Family is a daily act. It's not the blood, it's the bread. Who brings the bread? Who shares it?" Jonah wrote again in autumn, not to me but to Caleb. The letter apologized using the verb and asked for boat manuals. It seems he'd joined a prison vocational program. Caleb wrote back with diagrams drawn in pencil, arrows showing the direction of torque, explanations about patience that sound eerily like faith. Lena and I planted bulbs in October. "What are these?" she asked, holding up a papery teardrop. "Narcissus," I said. "Aren't those the ones named after that boy who loved his reflection?" "Yes," I said. "These ones don't drown." We laughed, not because it was funny, but because it is better than the alternative. In winter, snow stacked on the long stone wall like meringue. We salted the steps. We drank cocoa that stained our tongues. We watched Penny twitch in her sleep, no doubt running like mad against a wind none of us could see. You ask if life goes on after a thing like this. It does, like a stubborn plant pushing through a crack. You ask if love goes on. It does, though sometimes it limps. You ask if I still check the glove box. I do, like a woman who has learned the places where truth hides. There's nothing in there now but a gas receipt and a tiny shell I keep for luck. But every time I touch that latch, I feel the hinge again. The life before the key, and the life after. I'm telling you this for a reason. In towns like ours, we think betrayal is a story you read in city papers, that it wears Italian shoes and sits behind a smoked glass door. Sometimes it does. Often it wears a school ring from down the street and calls you mom with the same mouth it uses to explain a plan in which you are a problem to be solved. I am not saying this to scare you. I am saying it because sunlight is useful. You deserve to know where to point it. If you are listening to this from a kitchen table that smells like coffee and old wood, if you are hearing gulls you can't see, if you are counting the ways to be brave and coming up one short, know this: you already have the one that matters, the one that makes you stand up, the one that makes you open the glove box, the one that brings you to a back table in a cafe and says, "Tell me the truth, and don't leave anything out." I'm Nora Vale from Harbor Ridge, Maine. I have gray hair now, and hands with road maps for veins. I know the shape of sorrow and the weight of paperwork. I also know the exact sound Caleb's laugh makes when he drops a wrench onto his boot and pretends it doesn't hurt. I know my daughter's voice when she calls Mrs. Wilcox on Maple Street to ask if she'd like her porch light replaced. I know my son's block letters when he labels a diagram camshaft with 3 underlines, as if the word itself is important enough to hold him steady. We made it through because truth is heavier than lies and floats better too. Because decent people, Kira, Arden, Ellie, showed up and kept showing up. Because sometimes the lighthouse in your life isn't a person at all, but the way your own heartbeat insists on a rhythm you thought you'd forgotten. Did you like my story? Where are you listening from? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if a tale like this helps you or someone you love, consider tapping that super thanks. It helps me keep sharing these stories and keep the Harbor Light Project answering calls. On your screen, you'll find 2 more true life stories I think you'll love. Don't forget to subscribe so we can keep each other company. I'll see you in the next one.